Hi again, this is Andy, K4GKP, and welcome back to the Ham Whisperer and Lesson 8 in the General Class Operator Element 3 exam. In this lesson, we're going to be going over the G2C questions. The G2C questions deal with emergencies, including drills and emergency communications. And the general theme in this section of questions is that when dealing with emergency communications, you want to keep it as simple as possible. And also, when dealing with loss of life or property, or the potential of loss of life or property, pretty much anything goes. So if you can remember those two themes, you'd pretty much be able to answer most of these questions without too much review. When normal communication systems are not available, what means may an amateur station use to provide essential communications when there is an immediate threat to the safety of human life or the protection of property? Well, the answer is any means of radio communication at its disposal, and it's being the amateur station. And this is the theme I was talking about earlier. Now, you're permitted a lot of freedom to ensure emergency communications are handled quickly and effectively, and that also includes working outside the normal Part 70 restrictions for amateur radio. So if there's an emergency, there's a threat of human life, or you need to protect property, you can pretty much do what you need to do. Who may be the control operator of an amateur station transmitting in races to assist relief operations during a disaster? You don't want to overthink the question. It's pretty simple. It's only a person holding an FCC-issued amateur radio license can operate on races. So once again, this is a little bit of review from the technician course, but races is Radio Amateur Civil Emergency Service, and it is an amateur service, so you need to be an amateur radio operator to operate on races. When may the FCC restrict normal frequency operations of amateur stations participating in races? Well, the answer is when the President's war emergency powers have been invoked. So if the President's war emergency powers are invoked, they may restrict operation on races, and that's for national security and all that other stuff. So if the President makes this decision, all non-emergency communication may stop, and races may be restricted to specific frequencies for emergency communication or may be shut down altogether. So if the President invokes war emergency powers, you may be limited on what you can do on races. When is an amateur station prevented from using any means at its disposal to assist another station in distress? The answer is never, never, ever. So you're always allowed to assist another station in distress, and it's actually your responsibility as an amateur operator to do that. That's the whole purpose behind amateur radio. So pay your dues for all the time you get to spend having fun on the radio and assist those in distress. What type of transmission would a control operator be making when transmitting out of the amateur band without station identification during a life-threatening emergency? The answer is an unidentified transmission. And I kind of scoured the Part 97 rules to find out exactly what they were talking about, and it's not very clear. The point I could take from this is that if you are working an emergency call and you go outside the amateur privileges in order to deal with that situation, and you don't identify yourself, you're in an unidentified transmission. So even though you're outside the amateur band, you should always still try to identify yourself if possible with your call sign or whatever information you need to provide. What is the first thing you should do if you are communicating with another amateur station and hear a station in distress break in? Well, what you need to do is you need to acknowledge the station in distress and determine what assistance may be provided. So whatever you're doing, absolutely stop and deal with the emergency. And remember, this is part of your responsibility as an amateur operator is to help stations in distress. So acknowledge the station in distress and determine what assistance may be needed. When are you prohibited from helping a station in distress? Well, you are never prohibited from helping any station in distress. So do what you need to do, get their information, figure out what assistance they need, and help them out. What type of transmissions may an amateur station make during a disaster? Well, you can make transmissions necessary to meet essential communications needs and to facilitate relief actions, or in other words, whatever it takes. This could include forwarding information to emergency personnel, maintaining contact with the station in distress, or whatever. So you can make any transmissions necessary to meet essential communications needs and to facilitate relief actions in an emergency. Which emission mode must be used to obtain assistance during a disaster? Well, the answer is any mode. So once again, this is one of those whatever it takes type questions. So if you hear a distress call on phone on a CW portion of the spectrum, and you can answer them in phone if it's a bona fide emergency. So the FCC is not going to care if you're assisting somebody in distress. So whatever mode you need to use, you can use any mode. What information should be given to a station answering a distress transmission? All right, the location and nature of the emergency. So you want to keep it simple and keep it to just the essential information. You don't want to get chatty or anything like that. So you want to communicate where you are and what the problem is. And compared to other possible answers, this one is the only one that just has the essential information. If it doesn't directly address the situation, it's not important and it's the incorrect answer. So all you really want to communicate is the location and the nature of the emergency. What frequency should be used to send a distress call? Well, here we go again. It's whatever frequency has the best chance of communicating the distress message. So whatever it takes. So the nature of an emergency supersedes the majority of the Part 97 rules. So if you need to move around or you need to shift bands or whatever to get a good solid communication with the station in distress, do what you need to do. But you can use whatever frequency has the best chance of communicating the distress message. And that is the end of the G2C review and Part 1 of Lesson 8. If you have trouble finding Part 2, you can go to hamwhisper.com and check under the Ham Courses page. You'll find it down under the General Class course. So grab a pencil and paper for the quiz, take a break, get something to drink, and I'll see you in Part 2.